Mhm.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are. Good day to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shivani Khare, your host for the day. I take great pleasure in welcoming all of you to the day 4 of Global Emerging Tech Summit 2021, organized by University of Emerging Technologies, co-sponsored by the Emerging Tech Foundation, Computer Society of India, Andhra Pradesh State Skill Development Corporation, Global Engineering Deans Council, and International Federation of Engineering Education Societies. Every session, University of Emerging Technologies is about E5, evangelize, educate, empower, enlighten, and engage about emerging technologies. This conference is about bringing emerging tech closer to the next generation of professionals and making effective use of virtual education. We are delivering a series of 6 lectures ranging across various topics in emerging tech over 3 weekends, that is 6 days, Saturday and Sunday, in 6 sessions till the 2nd of May. Every session is opened by a keynote speaker who is an eminent personality from either tech or education, followed by the lecture of the day. Attendees are encouraged to send in their questions via chat, tweet, email, and then we'll have a separate Q&A session soon after the completion of the lecture. After that, Mr. Prasad Mahbudiri, CEO, University of Emerging Technologies, will deliver his closing remarks and also answer some of your questions. Now I take the pleasure in introducing a keynote speaker for the day, Dr. K. Manivannan. Dr. K. Manivannan is currently the Associate Director of SRM Institute of Science and Technology. He received his PhD in Theoretical Fluid Mechanics with distinction and MTech in Computer Science and Engineering. His research interests and expertise include theoretical computer science, theoretical fluid mechanics, fuzzy logic, and transform techniques. Dr. K. Manivannan is the coordinator of Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development Center, sponsored by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. He is currently the Vice President, Industry and Academia Relations, ICES, Chair GEDC India Chapter, and National Vice President of Indian Society for Technical Education. Additionally, he is also serving as advisory board member for the University of Emerging Technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Dr. K. Manivannan. So please.
Thank you, Shivani, for your wonderful introduction. It's my pleasure to be part of this event conducted by University of Emerging Technologies. First of all, I must thankful to the founder and CEO, Mr. Prasad from California. And I am also to give a talk on Android applications. Mr. Rabi Satter, the ex-senior program officer from Microsoft. Friends, we are in the pandemic since 2019, and COVID-19 has changed the way we teach and learn. You know that in the 21st century, the so-called big data, the machine learning, and the Internet of Things were the biggest educational technology trends in the 2019. However, the e-learning and online learning has become the trend that rules them all. The COVID teach and learn. Students now have to get used of e-learning via digital platforms due to social distancing. The latest educational technology and the emerging technology trends in 2020 and further into the coming years are being revolutionary with a strong focus on connectivity, versatility, and student-centered learning. Many people can recognize the emerging technologies, the so-called EdTech is devoting technology to promote education. It is true, but not sufficient. The Association for Educational Communications and Technology has defined the EdTech as facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological process and resources. In a nutshell, I can say that the education technology is simply is a process of integrating technology into education to build better teaching learning experiences that result in higher learning outcomes. Because we are in the outcome-based education, where we can talk about more of outcome of the students as well as skilling and reskilling of the faculty towards emerging tech. You know that today the teaching methodology has been changed into innovative teaching methods as well as improve the collaborative teaching, and also we make use of various technologies, because education technology enables teachers to create online courses where students can learn in their own space and also at their own pace. Firstly, education tech benefits how teachers teach both online and offline, not always having to go to a specific class at a specific time. Students can learn whenever and wherever. Secondly, education technology changes the way students approach learning. Education tech makes learning more fun and exciting for students. When we feel engaged in learning, we learn better, remember better, and also apply knowledge better to real life. Lastly, technology makes education smarter, more effective, thus satisfying the learner's needs more. True educators bring valuable knowledge to learners both in theory and also in real life. But smart educators are those who can create teaching from what learners want to learn. Today, in the 21st century, due to the emerging technologies, there are 10 latest education technology trends which will be useful for us towards e-learning, towards various technology enhancement for the engineering education. The first and foremost one is the so-called e-learning. E-learning becomes the top 2020 educational technology trend overnight because of the rapid spread of the pandemic and the closure of all institutions. This lead to a rising demand for online education through computers, laptops, tablets, or smartphones. This not only saving time, but opening many doors for interactive learning. Rather than being in a passive experience, learners can choose the students what they need to learn quickly and easily wherever they are. In e-learning, learners just soak in knowledge through reading or viewing content. It changes the way education is delivered. Also, many e-learning courses includes animation, podcast, and videos that create a multimodal and practical learning experience. That's why more and more online and blended learning courses are coming nowadays. Variety is the outstanding feature of online learning platforms. We can teach our students in real time, that is synchronized mode, via live stream or group meetings using Zoom or Microsoft Teams, or you can use recorded methodologies with a wide range of media and digital functions available to enrich lessons. A good online learning platform can also combined with a learning management system so you can keep track of your students' outcomes. The second one is video assisted learning, because in the recent years, video assisted learning has become more and more popular in the classrooms. This trend is also booming in e-learning conditions where The students learn through computer screens, videos, especially the animated videos, which are extremely beneficial to enrich the lessons and also the make the content more comprehensible. It improves students' outcomes and also it reduces teachers' workload. The next one is the first and foremost thing is the blockchain technology, where we already know that in the blockchain technology, the distributed ledger technology, the so-called DLT from blockchain brings so many benefits of to education, especially the data storage. Every time new data is added, it adds another block to the system. So the storage is technically limitless. Simultaneously, the data will be encrypted and distributed across multiple computers in the system. It makes transacting data decentralized and transparent. Blockchain technology is used in massive open online courses and e-portfolios to verify skills and knowledge. The DLC systems will answer the problems of authentication, scale, and cost for e-learning agencies. Moreover, it can help students, applicants publish their accomplishments during the job seeking phase. The other one is big data, which will get bigger. To cater to learners' needs, the learning experience need to be personalized. And with COVID-19 pandemic and online learning booming, we now have bigger data than ever before. Instructional designers have relevant information about learners' experience to customize and present the course in a suitable format. Some information we should look for is the course topic, the learner enrollment, learner's performance in terms of time per course, completion, test result, etc., and also the learner's feedback, both the rating as well as survey. The other technology we talk about is the so-called AI. AI is in thing in the US edtech market. People have predicted that through 2021, AI could become the primary trend and grow by more than 45%. So why is the trend booming in one of the world's largest market for education technology? First and foremost, AI can automate basic activities in education like grading. It is now possible for teachers to automate grading of the multiple choice and fill in the blank questions. Thus, automated grading of students' writing may not be educators would benefit from AI. For example, AI-driven programs can give both learners and educators helpful to get the feedback, and also AI systems to monitor students' progress and to alert teachers when there might be an issue with students' performances. Therefore, it is not too far fetched that AI is powerful assistant for in class teaching and also tutors where we can use all those things. The other one is the learning analytics. The learning analytics, because this also helps students in a different way. The current landscape of learning analytics is dramatically expanded, especially for higher education. Learning analytics allows educators to measure and report students' learning just by the web. From that, it is possible for them to better understand and optimize learning. Moreover, learning analytics helps educators identify blocks of students who may have academic or behavioral challenges also. So this gives a kind of teachers, they can develop how to improve the students' performance to the core. The next one is gamification, because gamification is another area where the lot of education institutions are adopting, especially the adaptation of the gamification is most popular in the K-12 education sector, because the kids are quickly engaged in gaming videos or getting higher scorers in a game. However, it does not mean that higher education or corporate training does not need fun elements to improve the engagement and level of learners. The next one is make use of the virtual reality as well as augmented reality, because a lot of immersive learning with these two technologies are emerging in the near future. The class learning experience has undergone a tremendous change since virtual reality and augmented reality came to education. The rise in demand for experimental learning pushes forward the development of learning with the VR and AR. Learning VR creates a chance for students to experience a real-world surgeries in a low-risk environment. The next one is we talk about the STEM, the so-called science, technology, engineering, mathematics, whereas today instead of STEM, it becomes STEAM, that is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So concerning the advantages of the STEAM, the first thing is that it helps students become increasingly curious about the world around them. Moreover, it also creates a safe environment for the learners to express and experience their ideas while thinking outside the box. The comfort of hands-on learning also helps the students collaborate better with others. The last one is the so-called the social media and learning, because today social media is helping the education sector in a very big way. In conclusion, what I can say is we know that there is a lot of digest when we talk about educational technology trends. However, keep in mind that technology has seeped into education and renewed its whole teaching and learning process in a different way, especially e-learning, an educational tool that not only increase the accessibility and convenience of education, but also changes the learning behaviors and learners' desires for learning. That's why I'm very happy that Mr. Prasad, who is the CEO and founder of Emerging University of Emerging Technologies, come up with this kind of e-learning and also hands-on training through virtual reality as well as augmented reality for the courses in the so-called blockchain, the so-called AI, the so-called cyber security, and various new emerging technologies for the betterment of the Indian education, not only for the USA, to across the globe. I am thankful for him for a wonderful opportunity. I hope this emerging technology is going to rule our Indian education systems in the near future. Thank you, Sivani, for your time. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful speech. Now I take the pleasure in introducing a speaker for the day, Mr. Rabi Satter. Mr. Rabi Satter is an accomplished leader with demonstrated success in building mobile software. He is the founder at App Echo, formerly known as Dark House Venture Software in Greater Seattle area. He worked at Microsoft for over 7 years as business manager and senior program manager for web frameworks and tools. Mr. Rabi Satter was the release manager for .NET 3.5 SP1 and .NET 4.0. He also developed data layer for Microsoft mobile line of business Accelerator to provide developers a real-world enterprise-class software that could be used as a template to build mobile applications. Mr. Rabi Satter is building mobile applications for handheld devices since the year 2000. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Mr. Rabi Satter. Sir, please.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? I hope.
Yes, sir.
Let me share my. Oops. Okay, let me share my desk. While I'm doing that, one thing you may notice is I'm shaking. I have Parkinson's, so it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal. So ignore my shaking. Okay. Oops. So I've been doing development for a very long time, and eventually got into mobile development very early in 2000 with cell phones and WAP cell phones. And we're now here, it's 2020, and we've got iOS, Android, Tizen, if anybody's ever heard of that. You also have Windows, you also have Mac OS, you have Linux, various flavors. And yet we all need to build apps on those. And that's what we're going to talk about, is strategies for doing that and technology specifically that do that. So just one thing I do want to mention. One of the things that I did right before I left is the open source project for Scott Guthrie, and out doing the open source procedures, processes, communications, communities, etc. for Azure SDKs and .NET libraries, including ASP.NET, MVC and Web API and Entity Framework, and a bunch more before I left, which was very fun. Actually was funner than what I did with the mobile stuff, which is very fun as well. It's also very difficult. So what we're going to talk about is cross-platform app development. And then specifically, what's the difference between Xamarin, React Native, and Flutter? And Xamarin is based on .NET technology, specifically Mono. React Native is from Facebook and React, and then Flutter is from Google. And then, oops. Xamarin Forms is specifically a way that you can build using Xamarin, not just an iOS app or a Android app, etc., but actually build a single app that can run on both Android and iOS and others. And then briefly touch on Maui, which is the direction that Microsoft is taking the whole Xamarin framework forward. So let's take a look at the whole cross-platform app development. When I first started doing this talk back in 2013, I think is when I first gave it, I said, how many people gave lip service to, you know, I have to just build an app and it's got to be cross-platform? But everybody kind of winked and nodded and said, yeah, not really, because there was only one platform, and that was Windows. They had a 90% market share, and it was a no-brainer to target Windows for any app that you were doing. But then along came the whole device revolution, and iOS in particular took that in a whole different direction and changed the world, as did Android. And I used to have a graph that showed the Windows was losing ground very fast, not necessarily by numbers, but as a percentage of overall market share between not just Windows, but Mac OS, Android, iOS, etc. And it became very clear that you really did have to do cross-platform. So how could you do this? And that's where we're going to talk now. We're going to touch on native tools, which I call the silo approach, browser as an OS, and then something called a MEAP, or Mobile Enterprise Application Platform, Mobile Development Application Platform as well, which is what they're transitioning into. So if you look at the first thing you could do is you could just build an iOS app, build an Android app, build a Windows app, build a Mac app, whatever you need it. And it's a pretty good strategy. The problem with it is, though, is what typically happens is you pick one device over the other. So kind of iOS rules them all or Android rules them all. And in particular, one of the app developer companies that did this, I believe, Spotify, they were like, we need to do something different because we're either going to have to double our size to have an iOS team and an Android team, or we're going to have to do something else. And even doubling our size is not going to work, because when Android gets a cool feature, the iOS people go, where's my version of that cool feature? Versus iOS gets a cool feature and the Android people are going, well, where's that? And the fact that you may have a bug, especially in code that's not displaying UI, that is broken in both places, and now you got to go fix it. But it's got advantages. So the first is it's completely native, and at the time it was very important that people thought, hey, if I write an Android app, it should look like an Android app running on Android. No different than a tool that was written for the Android, specifically by the Android OS team. You also have total access to device, and you can get some sharing of code via Web API, REST APIs. But again, very high cost, or either in terms of the number of people or some single guys and gals can do that. By the way, big tip, if you can do both iOS and Android equally well in native tooling, that's a rare skill set. Very rare people can do that. And then you've got the multi-code base to maintain and extend, and it's pain. And even if you do have both tools sets, it's hopefully that you're using that to then migrate to one of the cross-platform that we're going to talk about. So the next one is actually the first way iOS and Steve Jobs said, hey, just build a web page and that's your app. And the mobile device community went, what? This makes no sense. We need native access. And now suddenly we're back to wink, wink, nod, nod, browser as an OS, where you create a web page and it can look like an app and even be on the homepage of some of them. And you click on it and it opens a web page. Now, that's all well and good, but it's got some advantages and disadvantages as well. So first off, the advantages, it's just a web page. And oh, by the way, that means especially if you're doing a PWA, what we're calling a PWA, what we used to call Web 2.0 apps, that means you get not only the desktop for both Microsoft and Mac, but you also then can get tablets and iOS phones and Android phones. So that is pretty cool. Let me just move that out of the way for a moment, sorry. And the other advantage, which we didn't realize as a group of developers until too late, was the revenue sharing. With the web page, you don't share revenue with Apple or Google. With native apps, you end up sharing between 15 and 30% of your revenue to Apple and Google. And these days, that's a lot of money. That is a very huge amount of your revenue and budget going off to somebody who's essentially got a giant web server serving up your app. And yeah, they've got some costs and it's got to be covered, but they're making way too much money at this point. And there's now, at least here in the US, there's been several runs within various state governments to make new laws saying they can not do that and what they can do in the Google and Apple stores. So it'll get exceedingly interesting. It's not just lawsuits that you may have heard about. It's getting into governments as well, taking a look and going, what do we need to do here? The disadvantage is it's webbish. And what I mean by that is it looks like a web page. And you also have to test and debug a whole bunch of devices. And so your test matrix just explodes. So if you're doing testing, instead of testing one or two things, now you're testing 20, 30, 40, 50 things. And that's, pretty hard to do. The thing is also that you're stuck with the lowest common denominator as a subset. So if one web browser can only do a phone call and can't do other things, guess what your web app can do on all the devices? Just the phone call and nothing else, because otherwise you're kind of now getting into a multi-device problem again. But now I got a web page for Android, I got a web page for iOS, I got a web page for iPad. You don't want to go there at all. Oops. Oh, come on. Okay. Mobile Enterprise Application Platform, or a MEAP. This was put forward by Gartner back in the day. And what they were saying is, hey, just get a black box and all your apps and data will go through that black box, and it'll just crank out an iOS app or show it for Android or Windows or Mac or whatever. And it also included web pages as well. And so you could have, in the case of big companies with mainframes and mini computers, they could have those mini computers and mainframe computers spewing out their interfaces in the way they do, but then the MEEPs would turn it into something that could be seen on Windows and the devices. And it's not a bad deal. Well, except there's way too many devices and too many interfaces and sizes, and the OSs are all over the map, and it's just a pain. And so not only, essentially think of it as a black box that's taking stuff coming in and spewing out a web page, just like the browser base that I just talked about. Except now you've got to test a bunch of stuff. And oh, by the way, it's a magic box. So I have no idea what it's really doing. And you also risk vendor lock-in, and it was very, very expensive. But it had its advantages. It was cheaper to do a single black box and get everything than do an app at a time. So that was pretty important. You had a single code base to maintain, which was great, and the apps could even end up in the App Store if you needed it to. Which brings us to what we call a mobile development app platform, or even that as a term is going away now after many years. And like a MEEP, it seemed like it was a magic black box, but unlike a MEEP, you were not creating something that kind of looked at something and said, oh, I'll do this for every time I see this type of form. Every time I see this type of form, I'll do this. This was actually saying, I'm going to write an app specifically. And rather than write it to the OS, be it Mac, iOS, iPad, Apple Watch, Tizen, Android, Windows, it was, I'm going to write it and do something unique. A button is a button is a button, is how I say it. In other words, all the platforms have a button. The interface may be different. How you call the things to change the labels or the colors or do whatever you want may be different. But I can wrap up a button and say, here's a super meta button. The developer's code to that super meta interface, and then the meta interface goes down, and for Android, it does an Android button. For iOS, it does an iOS button. For OS X, it does an OS X button, etc. And that's pretty powerful. It also means it's compiled to a native app. And so you can basically take a single code base and extend it, maintain it, and hit a lot of targets at once. Back in the 90s, when Java first came out, and we had Java applets and Java apps in general, people were thinking, we're going to write it once and it'll run everywhere. And that mantra ended up being write once, debug everywhere. But in this case, it's become write once and debug across a few devices, but you're pretty much really, truly in a world of write once to this meta box and it will work wherever it needs to. The disadvantage is, okay, that was nice in theory until you look at every single device and the feature sets of those devices, especially on the Android side, is very fragmented. And a lot of Android devices, it looks like Android has a big market share, but it doesn't actually. What's happened is Android's being used as a OS for what we call a feature phone, basically a cell phone that has some features so people can make phone calls and do email, but it's not really an Android device as most people think of it, where it's this big, device that you have in your hand and you can do all sorts of things. So the other thing is, again, you're back to a common subset. The difference is there were, especially with Android and iOS, they have different features. And so there might be a feature in Android that's not in iOS. And so what Xamarin would do, for example, is they would build the feature for Android using the native API, and then go figure out how to make it work in iOS by writing code to make it work. In fact, and actually, can I say this again? Yeah, I can say this now. Don't tell the Microsoft police. But .NET in particular, because of backwards compatibility, they kept Windows 7 and Windows XP in place way longer than it should have, because .NET would do what I just said. In Windows 7 had a bunch of features that Windows XP didn't have, but the .NET team made those features anyway, work on Windows XP, and therefore people are going, what's the advantage of these new ones? And so it kept it in place way longer than it should have. And actually for a long time, .NET was hated by the OS group because they're going, you're preventing us from making sales, making money. Okay. The other thing that you'll face as a disadvantage is vendor risk and lock-in, sort of. But the biggest one is potentially a wait, especially depending on the OS manufacturer. So iOS, for example, used to be very secretive. It's less secretive these days. And so it was very hard for people to keep up with them. They'd have to wait until it actually came out to say, oh, there's this new feature. Now I got to write a whole bunch of code. And so you could end up waiting on new targets and features for some amount of time. These days, a couple of things have occurred. One, Xamarin, for example, and other vendors like React Native have gone ahead and created technology to wrap all those APIs automatically using programs rather than human beings, which speeds up the whole thing. In fact, I think I heard it takes 1 day to rewrap an OS that's come out for Xamarin, for example. So that's cool. But it could get longer. So that's a disadvantage. So let's talk about, of all the three, everyone's kind of agreed on the whole cross-platform thing being the thing you do, and this is how you do it, or you do native. So you're either native or you're cross-platform. And that's where Xamarin, React Native, and Flutter comes in. So Xamarin and React Native, for the most part, they're pretty similar. So Xamarin is based off of .NET, and in particular, a language called C#, and is used, although VB seems to be making a reappearance every now and then, as is F#. And what happens is you take your C# code and it compiles down into an intermediate language. And then they take that intermediate language, which used to run in the CLR or the Java virtual machine, and we can talk about that in a sec. And instead of doing that at runtime, it would do it at what we call link time and generate actual code that runs directly on the device inside that OS. So it's native code, just like if you had compiled it with Apple's tool Xcode, and Java running the IL code they generate for the Java bytecode and on the Java byte machine. And it turns out actually that Xamarin's implementation of the .NET CLR is actually faster than Java's, and therefore Java is not as fast natively as Xamarin is, which go figure, that's normally not the case. So those two are pretty similar. There's some differences. React Native, for example, is all about JavaScript. So if you know JavaScript, React Native is a likely candidate. If you know Xamarin, I'm sorry, .NET, C#, you're going to more go towards Xamarin because you've already got the skill set. And now instead of creating web pages or WPF for Windows, you're creating something for a device. Flutter, on the other hand, is completely different approach. So it's written by Google. And what Flutter is a complete replacement of what's going on the device. So Flutter actually, instead of where Xamarin and React Native will just call the button API and say, hey, put a button here. Flutter actually says, okay, I know about points and lines. I'm going to draw a button. And therefore, I'm in 100% control of what that button is going to look like, regardless of the device, which has got some goodness to it, but it's also got some badness, which is it's actually slower. So it's a toss-up as to which is faster, Xamarin or React Native, but both of them clobber Flutter from the testing I've done. Okay. Now, so let's look and drill into these. So Xamarin, again, is based off of .NET. In fact, Xamarin actually came out of work done at Novell and based on the Linux implementation of .NET that was called Mono. And essentially they said, hey, let's take Mono and create native code for Apple. And it's gotten to the point where Samsung has an OS based off of Android called Tizen. And they chose for their native environment for Tizen .NET. So if you know Xamarin and .NET, you can put your app onto every single Samsung TV, for example, and refrigerator that has the Tizen operating system. So that's an interesting use case, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Okay. And then in the case of Android, you're running on the CLR versus iOS, you're running natively. It's actually ones and zeros. React Native, like I said, it's JavaScript, it's React framework, but what they do is just like Xamarin, they spit out native implementation compiled code for the target platform. So it's just like compiling iOS code for Android. Sorry, back up. It's just like taking your Xcode and writing code for iOS, compiling it and getting native code, and taking Java and writing it and getting code for running on Android. But in this case, it's JavaScript and it's getting converted into either native code for iOS or Java bytecode for Android. So the two are pretty similar, like I've already stated. Flutter, dig it a little deeper into it. There's something called Skya, which is a graphics library that they're using to render the app. And basically, Google's basically said, we don't care what your operating system is. We're going to build our own thing because we think we can do it better. We'll see how far that goes. There was some excitement about it, but I don't know. I don't think it's gotten mainstream. I could be wrong. I could be in the minority, but I don't think it is. It's just, it's the direction that Java went with the Java apps and applets, and it was a complete disaster. And I think it'll Flutter is just a rehash of that same thing. And so it's not native. They write their own thing and do their own thing. And so it's like an OS on top of an OS with your app on top of that. So you've got OS real, you got Flutter OS, then you got the Flutter API and subsystems, then you got your app, and it's a lot of overhead just to render a hello world, much less do anything else. Okay, let's go to the next thing. So now let's talk about Xamarin, and then I'm going to start doing some demos here. So first off, if you've ever heard of Unity, Unity also runs on top of Mono, just like Xamarin does. And Unity is one of the biggest frameworks used to build games for iOS and Android devices. And it's used a lot. I mean, most of the top games are run on Unity. In fact, most of the games for those platforms are written in Unity. So I've always heard the tale, oh, I don't want to use Xamarin because it's slower than native. And I'd go, really? So you couldn't write a game in it? No, you can't write a game, especially something like Doom. You could never write a first-person shooter game at all. It ain't gonna happen. And I go, really? Here, let me show you one. Here, see this one. Oh, here, see this one. In fact, one of the first apps that I published in the Apple Store for a company that sold meat to various consumers as well as retailers. We built for them a electronic thermos or timer, essentially, that would say, okay, I've got these steaks, these are how the people want it, and it would tell you, okay, cook these first, cook these next, when to turn them, when to do what. And the first time I've ever had this comment I've ever heard, the client goes, could you make it slower? It's too fast, because things would happen so fast. They were like, wow. All of a sudden you go from putting the meat on to, oh, you got to go flip these. And suddenly your flip timer would jump to the bottom really fast. And we had to actually put in delays to make it look slower as it moved. I don't know if you ever get that experience, it's kind of cool to go, because most of the time you're getting responses like, oh, can you make it faster? It's really slow. And this time I'm having a client go, could you make it slower? Never happened before. So there's two parts to Xamarin. There's Xamarin Native and Xamarin Forms. And Xamarin Native is essentially a wrapper around all the OS for iOS or Android. And you write as if you were writing an iOS app or an Android app. The only difference is you're using C#, okay? And there's no sharing of that code between Android and iOS. But it was the first thing they did, which actually happened back way earlier. Like I said, comes out of Novell. And I remember when Novell got bought, I'm reading the newspaper, sitting at my desk going, okay, let me start my day. I'm reading the newspaper. Oh, Novell got sold to a Linux company in Germany. Huh, oh wait, what's this about Mono? They fired the Mono team? What? So I picked up the phone, called my counterpart in Visual Studio and go, do you see that Novell got bought? Yeah, it's no big deal. They fired everybody. Click. A couple weeks later, Miguel got $1 million. I have no idea if there was any connection, but I suspect there was. Now, go back to a button is a button. So now put another layer above both the native for Android and the native for iOS, and that's Xamarin Forms. So essentially, Xamarin Forms is a generic set of APIs for doing UI, the underlying subsystems, et cetera, whatever you want to do. And it's all the same thing. So you interact with Xamarin Forms button in a single way, and under the covers, it goes, oh, I'm running on Android, so I need an Android button. Oh, I'm running on iOS, so I need an iOS button. And it handles that detail for you. And otherwise, you're just saying, hey, here's what I want it to look like. Here's what I want to do in a unified API, which is very cool. Okay, so let's actually do a couple other things. I've done the native part. The forms part, let's look at that in depth. So there's two parts. There's Xamarin Forms, and there's now something they call Xamarin Essentials. So Xamarin Forms was their original set of APIs. But when they built it, for example, and this just blew my mind, they didn't have an API for a camera for 5, 6 years. And yet everybody wants a camera. That's where Xamarin Essentials came in and said, oh, let's start putting things like that, phone calls, et cetera, things that aren't UI in Xamarin Essentials that cut across both the apps and I can do a single camera API and deal with that. For the UI itself, they have XAML. And what XAML is essentially, think of it as HTML, but for UIs for native apps. And actually, when .NET's WPF uses XAML as well. For non-shared UI code, they actually found it's usually 100% reusable across a target, various targets. So when I write code, if you create a very good layering of UI versus code and actual what's going on with the data and the services underneath. Let me go back a little ways here to show you something. Okay, so you've got this shared code right here in the shared code. That is not anything that doesn't touch a OS call or a UI call can be 100% shared. What they found, they had an app for a while that would look at your code and it could tell you, oh, you can get 80% code reuse. And that was cool because prior to cross-platform, code reuse was just kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod. And now we're actually saying, oh, I'm actually reusing the same piece of code on iOS, on an iPhone, on a watch, on a TV, on an iPad, on Mac, on Android Wear, on Android tablets, on Chrome, on Windows, etc. Which, you know, in a very short span of time, 2013 was what, 7 years ago? Suddenly we went from cross-platform as a buzzword so that you could be fully buzzword compliant to a, hey, I need this to actually work and do what it said it did, which is compile it for each target, and it works. Okay. And then let's actually look at a demo. Okay. So let's, okay. So what you got here is what I call cat photos. And you've got 3 projects. You've got cat photos, which is your app. And then you have something called cat photos Android and cat photos iOS. And as you can imagine, Cat Photos Android runs on Android. Cat Photos for iOS runs on iOS-based devices. If you look at those, there's not a lot there. Some resources, some properties, etc., packages, but code-wise, there's not a whole lot of code. Even Android, same thing. Just a lot of properties and not a lot of code. The bulk of your code is under Cat Photos, where you've got your models, your screens, your services, and this is a shared library that runs, not runs, but can be used by Cat Photos Android, Cat Photos iOS. So both need a screen. Let's go look at a screen. Let's look at breed list. So here's XAML. And by the way, you can also do it in code, but essentially what happens here is rather than write code to say, create a content page, inside that content page, there's a binding context. Inside that binding context is a breed list, vendor view model, etc. It's declaratively made where you say, hey, I need this set of objects, create it for me, and wired up this way. And so the XAML gets turned into code. And then underlying that is the actual code that you write, which is what should I do when, let me get this, make this smaller. So what happens when something's tagged? Do this, boom, 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 I'm done. And so this is what I call a code behind. Then you've got models and services. And essentially, you got a model view model pattern with XAML and with the XAML. So you've got your UI, which is your view. You've got a model for that view, and then you've got another model that it's mirroring in reality. So you don't want to show, for example, if you're a bank, you might want to show parts of the bank account record in different forms, but you never want to show them together. And therefore, you don't want to actually send across that data to the phone if you don't need it. And so that's where the view model comes into play. And the view model paradigm is essentially that. You've got the model, the real model, and then before you send it across, you change it into the view model, which is slightly different than model view controller. I love model view controller. It's so fun. MVC is so fun. And let's actually go through this. Let me run this real quick. Let's just do iOS. Second. Oh, nice. Thank you. Oh, demo gods. I appreciate it. So just so you know, from because you may have never seen Visual Studio, it's usually much more rock solid than that. I'm running a whole bunch of stuff on a single machine, and you would never do that in real world. Okay, where's Visual Studio? Where'd you go? Q. Cat photos. Okay. So we want cat iOS. Let's pick a iPhone 12 Pro, and let's run that. So it compiles it, brings it up. Close that one. And so it's running a simulator. And here we go. We've got all these cats. So if you like a Devon Rex, this is what a Devon Rex is. There's a picture. Let's look at another one. You can see it's pretty fluid. Maine Coon, this is largest cat. And it's going off to the net and grabbing a photo. Some, and some it doesn't. I don't know if it's going to bring me Maine Coons. No, bummer. No, there it is. Look at that kitten. That's a cute kitten. All right. Okay. And you can see what's going on. There's a lot of threads going on in the background. This is a whole integrated environment, and it can do all sorts of stuff, which we won't get into. How am I doing on time? We're about ready for questions. Do one other thing before I close this down. Okay. Here's the big mystery that will get answered. So this is the difference. There's something called an app, and you create it and you start running it, whether you're iOS or Android. The difference is how they do it and how they run it. And obviously Android has a lot larger footprint, whereas iOS, they just say, hey, go launch this thing, I'm done. Okay. Cool. So MAUI stands for Microsoft Application UI. And it's gonna, so right now, you go, if you talk to people that do apps on Windows using Windows WPF, Windows Presentation Framework, they use XAML as well. Xamarin uses XAML as well. The problem is Xamarin created their own version of XAML that didn't rely on WPF's version. So a WPF XAML button is different than a Xamarin XAML button. Is that enough X's in there? I don't know. And so they're going to unify that. And in also unifying it, they're talking about essentially how you had an Android app and an iOS app and then the real app. There's just going to be the real app. And they're focused on 4 main things. So number 1, quality. Xamarin has been, in recent years, very focused on getting rid of the bugs. And so they're going to spend a lot of time just doing quality control and standardizing some things and making it unified with WPF. They're also going to look at performance. So they've been working on performance a lot. Android performance is not that robust. When it first came out, they've increased the performance year over year, so that you get a much faster start and more responsive. The design, they want to make sure it's very easy and very quick to make stuff. And they're targeting, the first round of targets is Android, iOS, Mac OS, and Windows. Now, there's a big controversy in this, which is where's Linux? Oh, it's Microsoft. Of course they wouldn't do a Linux implementation. Time out, guys. So first off, the open source, .NET is done under open source. So now is Xamarin and Xamarin Forms. Why they're not doing Linux is because the Linux world has multiple UIs, and you got to figure out which UI SDK you're going to use. So they've got like 2 or 3 competing toolkits for doing UIs. That makes it very hard as a vendor creating a cross-platform to figure out what to do. Now you might be going, well, wouldn't that just be, well, one's Android, one's iOS, one's Mac OS? Yes and no. The problem is the market share is much smaller. So there is a Linux version coming. It's just not, Microsoft's just not going to throw any of their money and personnel at that problem. They're going to let the community take it and drive it because they're better at that. Okay. And then we're to questions and answers. Now I'm doing it on time.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very insightful session. It was really informative. So we have a lot of questions raised by many of the members in our audience. Thank you all for being so attentive. I'm sorry, but due to the time limitations we have for now, we'll be addressing a few, and then we'll try to answer the remaining questions individually after. So we have a first question for the day. Could you please tell us the advantages of using Xamarin over other mobile application development frameworks? I know you already discussed React Native and Flutter. Could you please compare it with other frameworks?
Yeah, so there's a couple others out there. Titanium is one of them, as is a tool called Delphi, which if you have ever done Delphi, it's just like .NET. The advantage, really, it comes down to what technology you know. So if you're using .NET, you might as well use Xamarin because you get to reuse all your knowledge of the current SDKs, base SDKs for things like data types, data, Entity Framework, etc. That all is just reused. And so what you learn on Xamarin is UI for the various devices and how the various devices are going to interact with that technology of the databases, et cetera. If you're used to using Delphi, which is Object Pascal, you would use the Delphi that can shoot out iOS and Android implementations, just like React Native and Xamarin can. Titanium is actually a new development environment and tool and language that was specifically written for this market. And so there are some advantages there in that they have a much more unified environment. But again, it's really the same thing. It just comes down to what you're doing. So .NET shops are going to go with .NET. Java shops are going to probably go with either React Native or Flutter.
Thank you, sir. Sir, our next question is, can you please tell us about the trends, future technologies, and career opportunities in mobile app development?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sir, can you tell us about the trends, future technologies, and the career opportunities in the mobile app development?
Yeah. So a couple things. Let's start with career-wise. When I did this talk, I used to do put a lot of economic data in here. And essentially what it comes down to is you can make money doing mobile apps in a couple of ways. One is you make money from selling the app. And so if you get a hit, you could make millions of dollars, right? But those are few and far between. They're unicorns. The other way you can make money is by building apps for others. So I have a company that builds mobile apps. I serve a market and I make money. The biggest way to make money, though, actually, turns out, is to be a contract developer. And you are essentially a hired gun being brought in on various projects that are mobile based. So you'll work for 6 months to a year on a project, then go work on another one somewhere else, etc. And that actually is where most of the money gets made. I believe the number is in the, 60 billion or something, 100 billions, whatever. The majority of, I think the last time I saw it was like 2/3 of that revenue is from contract work. As an app developer, clearly their revenue is included in that $100+ billion, but they're not making as much as contract work or creating apps for specific markets. So that's one thing. As far as trends go, we're seeing a trend now, like I said, of cross-platform. So writing it once and being able to run it in multiple targets. And those targets are exploding exponentially. And that's one trend. The kind of the under the cover trend is security. So most people, when they think security, they're thinking authentication and authorization. With mobile apps, it's more than that. So I was at a conference several years ago, and a Xamarin conference, and a Xamarin consultant that worked actually for Xamarin did a security talk, and that's essentially what he said. It's, log in, what's your authorization to do something, you're done. Then a vendor, thank God, was allowed to do a talk. And this guy comes out on stage in a tiny room too, which was unfortunate, and starts to show people how he's breaking into apps to disable things like free version versus paid version, taking out ads, or my favorite, putting in side loading apps, meaning his app comes in and kills your bank accounts and says, this is what's going on. And here's the kicker. One, the whole room went, holy shit, pardon my language. The other thing is, he was the sales guy. He wasn't one of the developers of their product. So that's going to be a big area that you need to get aware of. And then finally, the other thing that's coming along is things like AI and edge computing, where the devices are just becoming part of the cloud. And we'll see more and more things that take the app running on the device and put it further back where the device itself is just a UI shell.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure it is going to help our viewers who are looking for opportunities in this field. Sir, our next question is regarding the security issues. What all security measures do app developers have to follow while developing any mobile application?
Yeah, so you definitely need, obviously, authentication, authorization. But the biggest thing is actually looking for the holes and figuring out ways to keep those holes from getting used and or abused. I believe the number I heard several years ago was 90% of all Android apps had been hacked, and almost 50% of iOS apps had been hacked if you were running a cracked iOS implementation. And so unlike the web where we've got things where we're going, hey, here's what you do for the web, there's not a good list for mobile right now. So that's another good place to be, security.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is Dr. Nagendra Kumar in YouTube chat wants to know how to run the iOS emulator on Windows host machine, basically to test the developed Xamarin applications.
Repeat the question again.
How can we run the iOS emulator on the Windows host machine just to check if the apps are working fine? How do we run the iOS emulator on a Windows?
Yeah. So Microsoft has solved that problem for you. So I happen to be using Mac because I just use a Mac. And so Xcode has a simulator. When you do iOS on Windows, what happens is you still got to have a Mac to do the compiles, and the machines get kind of paired. But same with the simulator. Essentially, Microsoft is screen scraping the Mac simulator, and hold on. And is screen scraping that. So one of the things that's your friend if you have Windows is Mac in the cloud. There's actually a company called, or a service called Mac in the cloud. Did I answer the question okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir, our next question is, does Xamarin support geofencing applications?
Xamarin? Well, Xamarin doesn't support any specific application. It is a tool for writing applications. And yes, you can write geofencing applications. You can write your own Uber, for example.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, our next question is our last question for the day. Could you please tell us about the roadmap for growth and future of mobile application development?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Can you please tell us about the roadmap for growth and future of mobile application development?
Yeah, so it's growing wildly, like double, triple digits every year. It went from like a couple billion to hundreds of billions today in 2020. When I did a talk back in 2016, I was looking at that and going, that's a huge climb from 10 or 20, 30 billion to 100+ billion dollars in like 4 years. But it did happen. There's a lot of opportunity here for somebody who's looking for a job or to make money. There's, you can just be a developer work the issues, work the apps. You can be somebody who comes up with new apps and gets people to write, drives getting them written, or you can, write your own app. And there's a lot of growth. It's a huge amount of growth. The one downside, and the one problem that's coming up, which is an emerging trend, is how the stores for Android and iOS, Apple and Google essentially, are going to take their essentially ginormous mall and make it easier for people to find apps and or cut down the costs that they're taking out of people's revenue. It's just, the cut is way too big. And there's way too many apps. So there's like, I don't know, millions of apps, multi-millions of apps. And so you can't just put an app in the store and make money like you used to. And when that was occurring, the 30% was fine because essentially Apple or Google was taking care of marketing. But now, in order to have a successful app, you have to market it yourself. You can't hope that Apple will somehow magically put it on the front page and suddenly you've got a hit. So that's probably the biggest emerging trend right now, which isn't even a technical trend. It's a political and legal issue and business issue.
Thank you, sir. I hope Mr. Rabi Satter was able to answer all of your doubts. We still have a few more questions pending, but due to the time constraints, we won't be taking any further questions. Now I want to invite Mr. Prasad Mahbudri, CEO of University of Emerging Technologies, to present his thoughts on the opportunities in emerging tech. Sir, please.
And thank you very much, Shivani. Thank you, Rabi. That was a wonderful talk. Appreciate you speaking. It's great. Yeah. And I think people would realize, where you presented the opportunity to develop mobile apps across the platforms, right? And also just writing one code and not only it gives you to post on both platforms, and you can actually sync both the platforms in one place and maintain them. It's a wonderful one. Thank you very much for that. And also, I really thank Dr. K. Manivanan. He's so nice, and he has shared his thoughts about the trends in online education and what to look for. And I appreciate him for taking time and speaking with us. Appreciate that. And then, of course, Shivani, as usual, I always appreciate what you're doing. And then all of you, especially, taking time on a Sunday and attending this, and hopefully, this is very useful to you, and I'm definitely enjoying this. So what I want to do is I wanted to share my thoughts about University of Emerging Technologies and why we are here and what we are trying to do, etc. And hopefully you will like it. Again, I think at the very beginning, Shivani has emphasized that we are all about E to the power of 5, evangelize, educate, empower, enlighten, and engage about emerging technologies. That's the University of Emerging Technologies mission. And we are also powered by a nonprofit called the Emerging Tech Foundation. Basically, what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that our curriculum, our methodologies, etc., are checked by somebody. We want it to be, we want to have a fiduciary agency, which is a nonprofit, which is an independent one, which is also run by industry and academia. So we voluntarily went to the Emerging Tech Foundation, and we got it so that we can keep ourselves honest. That's the whole deal. And it's really working out very well because we are able to get the content and get the courses and all of them, which is more relevant to the real life and also vetted by the industry, right? Because the Emerging Tech Foundation is supervising us on that. Okay, so what do we offer to the world, right? So I think what is really needed now, already the traditional outlets are delivering BS and BE and BTech degrees, or ME or MTech degrees, and polytechnics are giving some diplomas and all that stuff. But then, what is really lacking in the current market is a deployable skill. So we thought we have to have something which is more practical, more deployable, and directly towards creating jobs. So we thought we should be more vocational, and this is we started issuing short certificate courses. And also, I must tell you this, University of Emerging Technology is an unaccredited university at the moment. And we are actually working with some agencies, both in European Union and in North America, to have accreditation for us so that we can also, in addition to these courses, deliver BS, MS, and PhD, programs as well. But that is coming, next 8 to 12 months, you'll see a lot of change. But right now, I think we are giving not for credit short certificate courses, and then upskilling and executive education in engineering, which is very lacking right now, all that. So the short certificate courses especially is very, very relevant to outgoing students out of a BTech, a BE degree, right? They need some internship, some practical training, and that would be really useful when they go to the jobs. So, and similarly, you can take a number of courses and then bundle them into micro degrees. And I call each of these short courses as nano degrees, because micro degrees are a bunch of nano degrees. And as I said, they're role-based and deployable. And we also can, people have options to do subscription. This is every month, you pay something, and then you take the courses, as many courses as you can in a year, and finish it. Or you can have an a la carte, where you can pick up a particular course and take the course and finish them. So these both models are available, and in a subscription model is much more cost effective and continuous and all that. So we are offering both the models. But again, one more time, I want to tell you that basically we are focusing more on the short certificate courses, not for credit. And then we are also focusing on executive education, where in fact, if you look at the executive education scene in the world right now, it's more towards management, not into engineering. So what we want to do is we want to get especially industrial IoT, and where all the industry people need it. How do we use emerging tech in it? And also, if you look at it, and everybody needs product development, basically product managers who have to know certain finance, marketing, and engineering. There is no such course, or very few universities are offering courses and all that. In addition to that, there is a big need, especially in India and the developing world, right now, is that when the accreditors have opened up for this colleges to issue degrees in emerging tech, let's say AI, ML, cybersecurity, or any other thing like that. The issue is getting quality educators, labs, and then also keeping them up to date, because the technology is going too fast. So what we want to do is we can actually white label the colleges, and we can teach their students the course, the part of the course, either it is in a year full, or a year long, or a semester long, whatever that is. But we can do that. That way, they don't have to maintain their own faculty, labs, and all that stuff. And we would like to help them. and our team is working very hard. For example, our assistant vice chancellor is here right now. Chandra is working hard, reaching out to some schools, and they're all interested in it. And Dr. K. Manivanan is also reaching some people in the industry right now, and in Sudan and in Iraq and other places, in even Germany, a lot of people are asking for this. So, but that's what we want to bring to the table. So we will keep the quality. We'll do that. And also, one more thing that I wanted to tell you is that when we have the accreditation for the BS and MS degrees, and we will have certain certain rules and regulations for that. When we are accredited by either by the European Union or the American and North American education societies, some of the societies. So then what we can do is we can partner with the local colleges and try to see if we can issue joint degrees, so that they have an accredited American or a European degree, and as well as the local Indian degree or Sudanese degree, or any degree that you would have. So that's a tall order. We're all cylinders pumped up, and we're working very hard. And I really thank my team and the students coming forefront to learn all this. But again, there's one thing that I always wanted to emphasize. In fact, that is the real pillar here, is that what is the difference between us and the rest of the outlets, online outlets that they're teaching these courses, right? If I were to believe, and you were to believe, the numbers that are thrown by the Coursera's and the Edurekas and the Unacademies of the world, they would have really really educated the whole world twice or thrice by this time, because the numbers are staggering, right? But what's happening there is, it's not that they're lying, but the people are getting into those courses and they're not finishing up, because the very, very simple reason is that they don't have an experiential learning. It doesn't make sense. A lot of it is theory, and then you don't have a feeling about it. Like you don't feel it, you don't practice it, you don't get it. As simple as that. So we have approached experiential learning. That is our pillar. That's our philosophy. And also one more thing that we have seen is that we wanted to have more live classes. People, it shouldn't be very impersonal. Although just because it is online, it can be impersonal. We want live classes. And most importantly, when you're studying online, especially when you're missing the camaraderie of the people around you, and you need to have support. You need to be able to talk to someone, chat with someone. So you need support, and we are planning to have 24/7 live labs, or whatever time that we need. We will figure that out, but we have a live laboratories and manned or women by, I would say, our academic enablers. So basically, they are like the teaching assistants, lab and teaching assistants. So where they will be there, and all the students can approach them, and they can work through that. There's live, so that any time of the day or night, if they're really working hard, they can do that. And one more thing that we want to do is give them a computer on the cloud, right? Personalized machine. So they don't have to bother about some DLL is not working, some browser version is not working. Oh, by the way, this I have to shut it down, or my antivirus is not letting me do that. All these problems we don't want the students to have. So those are the things that we really want, and we have real human help, and on top of it, real life project and a industry orientation, because we are already vetted by the Emerging Tech Foundation, and of course the whole thing is about job focus. So we always call ourselves, we're very proud of that, is that we are a socially responsible commerce. Right. So we just want to not just teach you, especially the students I'm talking about. We also want to make sure that they get into jobs and flourish. That's the whole idea. So we are very responsibly commercial organization. And also what we have found out in the market right now, there is a dearth of people skills. People don't know when they get into colleges, from the colleges to jobs, and how to behave in a group setting, how to be confident, how to be honest and without fear. And then how what happens in a project setting, who to talk to, all that stuff. So some people and career skills that we want to impart on people. And then, of course, we are also trying to do some prep support, right, to career preparation. But again, all of these things are unique features for us. So when compared to other people, we definitely want to deliver a good product so people can come. And also, this is not just for the students who are graduating now or going to graduate, or third years and fourth years of engineering, but also this is equally applicable to the people in the jobs right now who are currently employed and they want to upgrade themselves. This is a huge advantage for them, and we have bite-sized courses, and they can bundle them up and then become they can become professionals in any of the subjects. Okay, so this is what I wanted to share with you. And now, right now, the biggest one that is going on is the short certificate course and internships. This is a big need. Towards the end of the year, fourth year or third year, and people want to have some internship, and so we want to provide internship and get some projects from the industry and real projects, and then make them practice. Okay, so we are covering all the emerging tech. So it's already there in the website, and Shivani and the team can share the details with you. But this is a huge opportunity. People can come learn the subject and also do a real project. So that's an internship. That's hugely advantages for the students and anybody who's interested to do this, right? And of course, we have other courses. And one more thing that I really want to emphasize is it's not just emerging tech. Any technology that can get you jobs is important to us. Right now, there are so many jobs coming up, and everything moving towards a software-driven life. But not many people are not really equipped and geared towards it. So what we want to do is, even as simple as a Salesforce or a Java or an SAP course, all that stuff we want to offer. And we have now between 20 to 30 courses available, and we are increasing the number, and definitely you can take advantage of it. So right now we have internships, Java, and some ABAP, and all that stuff is there. But please reach out to our team and definitely do that. And there's one more big feature that I wanted to bring to your notice, guys, is when especially you are on a virtual environment, when as again I say, when you miss your people around you, the collaboration and the camaraderie of people around you, and you need a place where you can talk, right? This is a real-time share board, whiteboard, and number of boards you can have, and also any infinite canvas, and everybody can write, and also you can pin your documents, you can annotate a particular topic at any point of the recording. Like if you see the recording, you can annotate yourself, and lot of tools. It's much better than a real whiteboard, and then whiteboard over whiteboard, you can stack it and save it, and next session you can bring it up. It's so simple and easy. This is we are taking from another company, and we are integrating this, and very few people have this advanced. Not very people. In fact, I could count none in that I know of have this advanced shareboard. So we are coming up with that as well, so people can take full advantage of it, right? So I think we have tried to address all the practical problems in e-learning, especially, and also we tried to get the bite-sized courses, micro degrees, nano degrees, and all that, and definitely useful to you. And I'm hoping that you all will be able to take advantage of it. And I really, really thank all of you guys for attending this. And also I really thank my panelists today, who all attended, and appreciate the help. And again, I said one more time, I want to emphasize, we also get certification from the Emerging Tech Foundation, which is a nonprofit independent organization, right? And again, one more time, guys, thank you very much. And I know it's almost late in the US right now, but wherever you are, have a wonderful day. And I rest my case. And please reach out to me if you need to. And my team is all there right now. They can always answer any questions you have. And hope to see you soon. Go ahead, Shivani. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of University of Emerging Technologies and our key sponsors, I would like to thank all our speakers and attendees for making this summit happen. Without your support, this wouldn't have been possible. Next Saturday, on May 1st, 2021, at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time, we have Mr. Shesha Kishore presenting his views on understanding digital transformation. Please visit our website for more information. Thank you. That's it from my side today. Hoping to see you all on Saturday. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Good day. Good day. Thank you.
Thank you all, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.